Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Murtazashvili. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Pittsburgh in the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. I will admit to you I know very little about energy and power, but I do know a lot about communities. And I've been working on community development for the past 20 years or so. I started off as a Peace Corps volunteer in Uzbekistan. I worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development, working on community development issues before I went to grad school, also in Uzbekistan. Found myself unable to go back to Uzbekistan and spent a good deal of time in Afghanistan, where I've been working since 2005. I'm also a proud product of the Pittsburgh Public Schools, and I'm so excited to be working here in Pittsburgh. And it's been sad for me to come back here in many ways to see many of the problems in communities that existed when I was in high school and middle school and so forth. So it's good that we're thinking about communities as solutions. And so today I'm going to talk about community adoption of technology in one of the world's most extreme environments, which is Afghanistan. Now, I did not do research on energy issues in Afghanistan, but I did a lot of research on community development, and it was surprising to me how much energy issues came up during discussions. And I was looking, my research is focused a lot on how communities organize themselves, how they provide public goods when the state is either unwilling or unable to do so. So many of you who know something about energy are probably cringing, or electricity, cringing at this picture. To me, it just looks like some tangled wires. But Afghanistan, as we all know, probably has one of the world's lowest levels of electrification. High estimates put it around 25%. Low estimates around 15%. So as a result of what we've seen since 2001, a lot of people assume that Afghanistan was this tabula rasa, nothing existed, and to win the hearts and minds of the Afghan people, outsiders in the United States and European countries, NATO, thought it would be good to provide a lot of goods and services. And if you provide goods and services, this will win the hearts and minds of Afghans. And so Afghanistan in 2001 had a very weak state. The government wasn't able to provide a lot in terms of public goods and services, so everyone focused on communities. Community development became a mantra for the nonprofits, for NGOs, for international donors, as well as for the military and its counterinsurgency strategy focused on communities. So how do you get communities engaged? So in communities, so a lot of these community development projects in the nonprofit world, the NGO world, it's a bit different than you've seen in the social enterprise models. But typically, projects, NGOs will come into communities, they'll ask community members to get together, discuss what a problem is, give them a block grant. No, a block grant is very different from what you see in social enterprises. Give them a block grant and say, okay, you've decided on what your problem is, here's money, you solve it. You've decided collectively on your problem, we're going to give you some money to fix this. So in interviews that I did on community governance, one of the issues that came up quite a lot, obviously, was electricity. People in rural areas said, we need power, we need electricity, this will solve all of our issues. They associated having electricity with modernity, going into civilization, being able to watch television, listen to radio. A lot of people talked about micro hydropower because they thought that it could solve some of their irrigation issues along with their power issues. So this is a picture that I'll tell you about this picture after I talk about what's going on. So in rural Afghanistan, obviously there's a lot of implementation challenges, very remote communities, but solar panels became very popular among the development community. NGOs in particular began distributing solar panels to communities as a solution to a problem. Community members would say, well, we need power. So they got solar panels, and solar panels are very easy to distribute. It was relatively easy to set up many of these programs, but getting communities to actually use the solar panels I found was actually much more challenging. So people would say, and this is actually a picture from a village in Punjab district in remote Bamiyan province. It's about a two-day drive from the provincial capital. And when I was asking this family about what kind of project they had received from international donors, they said, we got solar panels. I said, wow. And anytime someone told me that they got a project, I'd ask to see it. Because when you're doing interview work, you really want to see, people can tell you anything, right? So I wanted to see their solar panels. He gets into the closet, opens the box. The family was very proud. They took a picture around their solar panel. They were so proud that they received the solar panel. I said, well, I mean, you've got this solar panel. What about the inverter? So this was not DC power, obviously. They said, well, as part of our grant, they gave us the solar panels, but we're supposed to supply the battery and the inverter. And they couldn't afford that. And this is something I saw over and over again in communities, where outside NGOs would come in with projects providing solar panels and electricity projects. And communities did not have the technical wherewithal to sustain them. So frequently, one person was trained in the community on how to install these kinds of things. But once that person received the training, they became very marketable. They could leave. And in fact, many people wanted to leave Punjab district in Bamiyan province. It's a very poor community, below subsistence levels. Very, very poor. So people left. And so people who were trained in the technologies left, and people were left with solar panels that they couldn't use. So at one point, the deputy governor of Bamiyan province, this is Bamiyan, maybe Bamiyan's famous for the Buddha statue that the Taliban blew up. And this is the capital, so you can see it's not a bustling, it's a town of about 20,000 people, the provincial capital. The deputy governor said to me, all of these outsiders come in, including our own NGOs with international funding, and they provide solar panels. He said, people have come to me saying they suspect the NGOs are getting kickbacks from someone who runs a solar panel company because every community is selecting solar panels. Something's going on. In fact, some communities actually mentioned this, that they were under pressure. And it wasn't just solar panels. Someone owned a diesel generating company, other kinds of projects. When you saw them repeated, when communities in one area were selecting the same kinds of projects over and over again, you knew something else was going on. The deputy governor in this province was really upset about solar panels. He said, yes, you'd think electricity is what would launch our province into economic development, but these solar panels don't really produce much electricity. We can't do anything really economically productive with them. Wouldn't it be better if these resources were spent on something else? So people weren't keeping their solar panels in the closet. So he was actually quite upset about this. And as we go forward and we think about how these projects are implemented, and I think this is what we need to think about, not just the technology, but actually how this technology is managed in communities. It's one thing for social enterprises and small businesses to be providing things that people are willing to pay for. In Afghanistan and in other countries, if you look at public opinion data, international NGOs among public organizations are the least, are even less popular than the Afghan government. I don't actually have the Afghan government statistics here, but I actually have the president and other data. National NGOs slightly more trusted than other kinds of public organizations. And I don't think this is unique to Afghanistan. I think around the world we're beginning to see international NGOs, which were once supposed to be gap fillers, become distrusted by people because they seem to be keeping themselves in business. Here's one area where you can see the solar panels, likely the result of a grant from an international NGO for sale in a local community. I'm not sure who was going to buy them. But just wrapping this discussion up with thinking about outcomes. So we have a tool, we have technology. We need to think about what are we trying to achieve with that technology? What is the outcome we desire? Is it electricity? Is it education? Is it community empowerment? Is it economic development? And is this the right tool to achieve that outcome? Or are we going to try to use a tool because we have it? What is the outcome that we're trying to achieve? This is a great example of a retaining wall that was provided by an international NGO in rural Afghanistan. They built this retaining wall about 6 months before, and the communities complained that the contractors who used it were corrupt, who weren't using the right materials. Last week, we had the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction visit the University of Pittsburgh campus, and I asked him, have you seen one successful, what was the most successful reconstruction effort you'd seen? He said he couldn't name one. He said he'd actually asked the State Department and the Department of Defense to come up with a similar list, and they refused to name them. And it doesn't mean that there are not successes. What I've studied in Afghanistan is how communities themselves are able to overcome collective dilemmas and solve their own problems. You have very proud societies where people are actually quite able to do things on their own. But outsiders have not been able to harness that collective energy. And when I was hearing the discussion this morning, and I think we can talk about more of this during the discussion time, one of the major strategies of the United States during its counterinsurgency strategy was government in a box. And you can imagine how well this played out in rural Afghanistan. It's not that people in rural Afghanistan dislike the state or inherently dislike NGOs. They've just been subject to some of the worst government imaginable in the past 50 years. So they're inherently suspicious of outsiders who are coming in and offering them something. And I think that's just words of caution as we provide solutions and we think about what people want. Let's think about what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. That's it.